What I've found about pharmaceutical research and healthcare research is it doesn't tend to be a leader in research techniques. It tends to be more of a follower. I think I'd like you to try and keep that in mind because we're taking small steps at the moment, and I'd like to take you through some of those small steps. So, what I would like to tell you about is the journey so far and where we've got to. And this journey started when we were carrying out a piece of research. It was a piece of research for Merck, and it was about channel optimization. And Merck was very surprised when the results came back to find out that as far as their target audience, which is the doctors, the specialists, the physicians, they were highly engaged in the digital world, which meant in terms of channel optimization, they had to design their communications to be connected with the physicians in terms of the digital space. So they came back to us and said, well, we've just done a classical piece of online market research, but we found out that the audience is highly connected. Shouldn't we do the market research via mobile? And we didn't know what to say to that. So clearly, after a lot of discussion, Merck then decided to commission a piece of research on research with us to find out whether there's any differences that we'd find. So one step was to ask the question. The second step was to say, right, we will do research on research to find out the answer. The next small step was that we then came back and we presented the results of that research on research at the USA conference, the USA conference for mobile research. It was viewed as being very interesting, and we've now taken another step forward, and we've brought the findings to Europe, and we've done further research in Europe as well. So we're taking small steps forward. I think also I'd like to talk about the context as well. We are talking here about big pharma, so I'd like you to think about bringing a product to market, but we're talking about bringing a drug to market. So we're talking about the launch process, which goes back to clinical trials. It goes back to deciding what information is needed, understanding how patients are being treated, understanding how physicians are making treatment decisions. It can be quite a complex process, the research that we're doing. And generally, it's international research, and it can be quite time-consuming in terms of the questionnaires that we're using. Generally, the research that we're doing is 30 minutes plus. Quite often, it goes to 45 minutes and an hour with a physician. And of course, physicians are very specialized and quite a small target audience for us as well. The next thing I'm going to be talking about is what the implications are of the research that we've done. And they're very, very straightforward as far as I can see. And as I talk you through, hopefully you'll see exactly where this is going. But I think that is just another small step forward as well. So going into the data, one thing that we see very clearly is that everything is moving towards mobile. And this is the case with our audience as well. And something which we found very simple to understand is that physicians are using mobile devices in their practices at work. This is the data from the US for smartphones and tablets, 84% in the US for smartphones and 54% for tablets. I've put in the data for EU5. You can see EU5 is lagging slightly behind as well. I've also put in the data for taking the EU5 and showing where we have quite significant differences. So, for example, we have a situation with tablets where the highest usage within practice is in Spain. But we have a situation in France where we only have 29% of our respondents. These respondents are physicians and specialists using tablets in practice. Why is that? Well, it's very clear when we do further analysis. The reason for this is that bandwidths within hospitals in France isn't particularly great. Difficult to get wireless connection. It's very limiting. So it's at that point where they're finding it difficult to use the devices in France in comparison to, say, for example, the UK or Germany. The next question was, are physicians using mobile devices actually in patient consultation, in front of the patient or away from the patient, but as part of the consultation process in deciding how to treat the patient? And what we found here, and this was one of the key questions which drove Merck to say we need to do research on research. They found that 65%, 61% were using smart or a tablet device as part of the consultation process. Looking at EU5, we got very similar results for smartphones, and looking at tablets, slightly lower, but again, what we have is the situation in France where we have a lower usage of tablets. What's also interesting here is that Italy, in consultation, having very high usage of both smartphones and tablets. I don't know whether that is to do with showing off the device or what. It's difficult to say, but there's an interesting finding to dig into. So, does this really matter to market research? If mobile is redefining the practice of medicine, do we need to redefine the way we do market research so as to follow that practice so that we can work with our target audience better? And clearly what we've done is that we've moved from telephone, and there was a lot of methodological discussion when we moved from telephone to online. And now what we're saying is, can we move from online to use of mobile devices? What are the issues going to be for us when we do that? And would this solve any of our research issues? And we've got some very significant research issues that we're trying to deal with. Most of our studies, they are multinational studies. We are dealing with a drug being launched by a big pharma company, which will be launched globally. We are talking about small, specialized audiences. We're talking about talking to an oncologist, and they are a very small number of these specialists that we know will take the market research survey. The audiences are becoming more difficult to reach, as in all audiences, and they are becoming over-researched as well. So, as I've said before, we are dealing with complex issues as well. We are going to be talking them through a new drug profile where they'll be seeing clinical trial data and they'll be making decisions as to whether this drug is now going to be used in preference to a drug which is standard of care currently. And the final point, which we're very aware of, is that the industry, in terms of the panels, tend to restrict, when we carry out a survey, tend to restrict the survey to being online only. They turn off the ability for the survey to be taken on a mobile device. So we need to address that issue as well, so that we can be certain that when we do turn it onto the mobile device, it's not going to affect, one, the data that we get, or two, the response rates that we get. So this is what we asked ourselves as part of the research on research. Is mobile limited to short, simple studies or not? A very significant question for us in our industry. And are we missing part of the physician population because they actually want to use a mobile device for all of their connectivity? So are we missing an important part of that population? And in that important part of the population, are they tending to be more younger? Are they tending to be more specialists? Because that's where we see the mobile generation going within our network at the moment. Is there an urgency to move market research onto mobile? And what kind of market research can be done on mobile devices? And finally, do the results differ between online and mobile if we do move over to mobile devices? So, first step to be taken here is that we need to carry out the research on research to answer these questions. This is the way that we thought about the research design. There are a number of issues that we have to look at. The first issue is what are the limitations that we have and the challenges of carrying out a mobile study with this audience. So what are the issues in creating the mobile survey itself, and the fielding of that survey. The next important point is, are the results comparable? And the final point is, are there any additional learnings that we need to take into account at this stage as we start this process? So this is an overview of the study design that we put together. And what we wanted to do is to take a study which we'd already carried out and then set up a design which would mirror that study and replicate the results. So we took a study which we'd already carried out, which was done in May 2012. It was a 45-minute questionnaire. Number of respondents were 302 completes. And this is quite a standard type of study for us. It's a demand study. So it's looking at what percentage of the target population we're likely to get with the drug profile we're about to put in front of the physician. And what we did is we took, within this 45-minute study, there's always a lot of additional questions asked, but we really wanted to focus on the most difficult part of the study, which is effectively the discrete choice exercise, and take that part out so that we can look at the impact that going to mobile would have on our forecast of what the choice allocation would result in. So we took out 10 to 15 minutes from this study and wanted to put that towards the mobile study that we were going to do. Number of completes, 291, and we wanted to make sure that we had a like-for-like comparison. So we wanted to mirror the online study as closely as possible. So the first thing we wanted to do was to mirror the sampling methods and the quotas that we had. We wanted to mirror the screening criteria such that it matched the online screening criteria process. We also wanted to make sure that key questions were identical between the online and the mobile study. And we also wanted to ensure that the same methodological approaches could be used to analyse the choice data that we're going to collect. And then all we want to do is to see whether we get any difference between the two sets of results. So to do this, you wouldn't normally, I think, moving forward, design a mobile study in this way. So this is designed to replicate an online study. Keep that in mind. So the recruitment process, the first thing that we wanted to do is to replicate the recruitment process. So the replication meant that we were going to recruit online. And we were going to recruit the physicians to carry out a study for us. So we'd use all the same screening criteria and we'd use the same effective methodology that we'd used previously. But we'd recruit them and invite them to a mobile study, which they would be sent the link to at a later date. Which was within a couple of days of them being recruited onto the study. So we'd replicated the recruitment methodology, but then we'll basically allow them to go through the study on the mobile device. In terms of the process, what we found during this is that we did have dropout because of a number of issues. The first point being that they had no smartphone, no tablet to carry out the study on. We knew that we'd get that. And there was an element of dropout because they didn't want to carry out the study on a mobile device. No desire to do so. Didn't think it could be done. But we did have the screen outs, 26%, which was normal screen outs that we had from when we did that online as well. They were invited to the mobile study, and what we found that 22% didn't access the link after they'd been invited. Now, this is associated with the fact that there's a gap, and we wouldn't normally have this type of dropout, but there was 22% that didn't access the link after they'd been invited to the mobile study. And then we had 14% who still wanted to access the link online, even though they were told very clearly there was a mobile study, they had to access it online. So they dropped out at that point there. Finally, we only had 6% who dropped out during the completion of the questionnaire itself. Now that is comparable to the normal dropout we'd find with an online study. So we're pleased to see that the actual process of completing the study on the mobile didn't result in greater dropout. Now, the way that we needed to take the study to the mobile was via an online browser. This is because, again, we wanted to replicate the conditions of how the previous research had been carried out. And of course, it has the advantages with this respondent that they know they've done surveys before within our systems and they know how the systems worked. We didn't have any of the issues that we might have with trying to teach them a new system or asking them to download an app. But clearly what it meant is that at this stage we're not seeing any of the advantages that we could have of using a mobile device. And clearly we had the disadvantages that when you start to go through profile information, they have to go to another screen and then come back. So a disadvantage there. But it didn't result in any further dropout from the study. We also collected verbatim comments throughout the exercise to find out what the experience was like. Now, out of 291 respondents, only 9 had negative comments, and 8 of those were from smartphone users. The majority of the verbatim comments we had were very much about the content of the study itself, rather than the process of completing online. Those comments were all about, yes, this is a great survey, good study, important topic, well done. It's very interesting, thought-provoking, informative. I enjoyed the survey, look forward to additional ones, thank you. All about the content, didn't focus on the fact it was being carried out on a mobile, which was the first time that they'd taken a survey of this nature within the mobile environment. So, are the results comparable? This was clearly the most important point which we were trying to find out as part of this exercise. And what we found in terms of the basic screening criteria, that on nearly all the variables there was comparability. We found out that in terms of certification, yes, the doctors were board certified. In terms of years of practice, in terms of who came into the study, 17 years, 18 years. In terms of direct patient care, the percentage of their time involved, almost exactly the same. In terms of the main practice setting, whether it was office or whether it was a private practice, very, very similar. In terms of the percentage prescribing to different drug classes, very, very similar as well. The only thing that we found was different was patient volume. What we found is that those people who completed the mobile study tended to have a higher patient volume. They tended to be more busy in terms of their own workload. But we also had no difference in terms of the types of patients they were treating or the severity of the patients they were treating. So it's this idea of more busy was the only difference that we found in the screening criteria. We also looked at, this is now looking at the reaction to the profiles we presented. So these are now new drug profiles, and we're asking how whether they would treat this type of patient with this drug profile. And we can see here there's very little difference between the mobile study and the online study for each of the different patient types and each of the different profiles that we looked at. No difference between the mobile and the online survey, which is an excellent result as far as we were concerned at this stage. So, were there also any additional learnings? There were obviously further analysis in terms of the choice exercises and what came out as being important, etc. And again, in that area, we didn't find any differences. Additional learnings, well, for the vast majority of questions, we found that the smartphone and tablet users were very, very similar in terms of number of patients, in terms of patients with a certain indication, in terms of patient types, in terms of current treatments, and in terms of all the modelling of the results that we did. Where we did find a difference is we found a difference between smartphone users, iPhone users, and iPads in terms of the length of the interview, the iPad shorter interview, and also the completion rates. The completion rates were higher for the iPad than it was for the smartphone. So a small difference there, which might mean that there might be a phasing needed, or that we have to think about when we're thinking about the mobile and the rollout to mobile of studies of this nature. So what does this all mean for market research with physicians? The big question mark which we went into with Merck. Well, we believe that the key learnings from this exercise are firstly that mobile versus online, the results are comparable. Mobile doctors appear to be busier, and when we look deeper, we might find out more information around this particular subject as well. But it does not appear to impact on the results that we're getting from these busier doctors. The second key learning is it's absolutely feasible to carry out complex studies, like a demand study, on a mobile device. And most of our studies are complex studies, using a choice-based or a conjoint type exercise, an allocation exercise. But it does require rethinking the survey design to make sure that you're using the utility of the mobile device itself. And is there an urgency to go to mobile when, firstly, we're getting the same results, and secondly, knowing that what mobile actually offers to us is a lot more than the online environment. I think that a lot has been said already today in the conference about the idea of having the device and the survey being carried out at the point of engagement. And I think that's a very, very important point for us in healthcare as well. And this is one of the great advantages of carrying out the survey with the doctor during the time that they're in practice and at the point of engagement close to the patient. Quite often we are doing patient case record studies where we're collecting information on a patient. So the conclusions for mobile research in healthcare, I think the first conclusion is that mobile research can be used more broadly than it's currently being used. I'm sure that's not a great surprise to you, and hopefully you can see the steps I've taken towards these conclusions. And the point is that healthcare professionals who are mobile device users are willing to take online surveys, and the results currently are comparable, which is what the research on research has said. And clearly what we're finding is that there is a growth in mobile devices, and that more and more people are trying to take surveys online, even when they're sent a survey which isn't designed to go online, go via a mobile device. So there is an attempt to actually take surveys. The research that we've just completed with the All Global panel across the EU5 with 1,000 physicians who were split between effectively GPs and specialists, what we found is that the most preferred device for answering a market research survey would be a mobile device with 35% of physicians, and that is actually higher than what we would have gone in thinking, which is that with the office-based PC, that being the most preferred device is only with 23% of physicians, and it's slightly behind where we are with the personal PC, which is what is the most preferred device for carrying out online studies at 42%. So we do believe that there's a great potential lies behind harnessing the power of mobile devices to carry out research, especially when we're engaging with the physician at the point where they're at their practice. But we do think that to get full benefit, we need to take more steps into this area to get the full benefit, so that we are rethinking the way that we're designing surveys and rethinking the way that they are taken by our respondents within the mobile device. So that's the journey for us so far. We've taken small steps. I think we're going in the right direction. And clearly, we've got to go a lot further. But we really see now that there's a great benefit here for the mobile device within the area which we do research. Thank you.